News of today, you all heard that GN1 is now almost at 90%. So it's basically the exclusive variant in the country, which is, again, what everybody's expected. I don't think there's any surprises. Kind of couple interesting things. Remember, I mentioned that the tests don't seem to work very well. Well, despite the fact that CDC keeps saying no, tests do work, turns out that's absolutely correct. And I will put a quick link to the fact that this seems to be observed by a lot of people everywhere, that unfortunately tests don't do very well. That looks like the main reality has nothing to do with the variant itself, but more with how and what particularly this strain infects. So it looks like it doesn't really infect nasal cavities as much as the prior strains. So when people, since most of the time the test is done, you simply put the swab all the way up to nose, and you kind of swipe it and put it in a test tube, and then you use that fluid. It turns out that really it may even be better to swab the back of a throat potentially, but nobody fully understands this yet. But the reality is a lot of people claim that first one or two tests end up being negative, and only third or fourth becomes positive. And one thing also to do is to simply test a little bit later, to wait until at least 24, even 48 hours into any symptoms that are arriving, if they seem like COVID, test at that point. So you can take a look at that link I just posted to read the full article there. Okay, couple other quick points. Medscape put out an article saying that unfortunately Paxlovid at this point leads to about 20% rebound, in contrast to if you don't take Paxlovid, the rebound is only at 2%. So at 20% rebound, to me, it's a signal that I will be decreasing amount of prescription of Paxlovid rapidly, because that's not acceptable. It's really not acceptable at that level of the frequency of this rebound. There was an interesting comment in off Medscape. One of the experts said that maybe the problem is not the Paxlovid, but the length of prescription. So maybe we should be giving it for 10 days instead of 5 days. I am not going to do that until at least there's some data to support that that's actually true. I do expect that that is correct. I think that the longer course of Paxlovid could make a lot more sense. It probably will decrease overall frequency. Now, of course, that means that, if somebody is on the medications that have interactions with Paxlovid, let's say statins, you have to be off of those medications longer. So it gets everything a bit more complicated. But nonetheless, it's one of those things that I think only should make people think more about jumping onto Paxlovid immediately and really talk to your provider as to whether or not you should really be taking it. So I think that was my two things for today. Let me just check real quick, make sure I didn't miss anything, but I think that's all I have today. Remember, I don't do wellness talk today, so I thought I'll just give you this two dates real quick. Oh, unrelated. So I'm sure everybody heard, but a week and a half ago, FDA put a formal statement to DEA asking to reschedule cannabis. So this was put by the health secretary of the United States. It's a formal statement. If anybody's interested to read the whole 250 pages as to why FDA makes that statement, I will post the link to it in a minute. But it's an interesting conversation. So basically, experts at FDA did this analysis and basically concluded that cannabis should not belong to Schedule 1, which of course we all knew, but so I think we will be seeing a very rapid change in this now. So my expectation is that no matter what happens with our next presidential campaign, it is possible that we will end up seeing cannabis being rescheduled before the end of this term of presidency, because the FDA made the statement very clear, DEA claiming that they will comply with this, and the Biden signaled strong approval and strong recommendation to proceed. So we may end up seeing congressional act somewhere in the summer of this year, which would be fascinating because it means we will have two substances moved away from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, which the first one will be MDMA or ecstasy. That will get moved sometime in the late spring this year. It's already decided. And the cannabis will potentially follow very shortly right after. Kind of unprecedented and very closely paralleling Australia, by the way. So Australia did the same thing, except that they also added psilocybin or magic mushrooms to that as well. So they have 3 substances that got moved from Schedule 1 to whatever their schedule. I actually don't know that for sure. So I'm putting that link in the chat. It's an actual Dropbox with a federal document. If you're one of those people who are going to read 250 pages of federal document. And then I'm going to repost again. So if you're interested in learning more about trauma, mental health next week, and if you come a little bit late, next week we're going to have, right after this meeting, we will have CIM Open Virtual House, talking about trauma, talking about mental health. We'll have different people presenting, and you will be able, if you're coming, you can ask any Q&A. It's going to be designed. We'll have a half of the meeting, 30 minutes for anything you're interested in asking or talking about. So I'm putting that link. All right, let's take a couple of minutes for questions, and then we'll move to Aliza. And maybe we don't have any questions.
If you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask it if you don't feel like typing it into the chat window.
Maybe there are no questions today. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Kogan, it's Linda. Do you mind just reiterating what the known or key symptoms are for this current 90% strain of?
It's exactly the same. Nothing new. It's the same. It's basically, just a different Omicron subvariant. Its significance is that it seems to be more virulent. That's why the cases are kind of sporadically appearing everywhere. And, there's still ongoing uptick in cases in most of the country, not everywhere, but in most of the country. But the symptoms are the same. But there's nothing specifically unique about it. No questions because it's too warm. You guys all well, yeah, that's question to everybody. So what's going on? So this is a classic crazy shifts related to global warming. It's very expected that you have an extreme of temperatures up and down, extreme precipitation, and then no precipitation. So it kind of like just the swings that were not observed before, very expected. So unfortunately, we should be expecting this to keep getting worse as we move forward. So.
It's almost 80 degrees here in the South Carolina Low Country.
Yeah, well, it's not even February yet.
I know, it's ridiculous.
And we had sub-zero temperatures in parts of the country just a couple of days ago. All right, well, that's fine. No questions, easier for me. So welcome, Aliza, welcome, Dr. Scharf, so much. You're gonna be with us. Oh, there is a question. Okay, I was just about to
See that pattern.
do you know how dangerous the elevated nitrogen air levels are these days? I'm not sure what this question asks. Nitrogen is a normal ingredient in the air. Can you specify what this means? What does that mean, elevated nitrogen air levels?
I'll take myself off mute. When can you hear me? When you look at the air quality reports, I type in air quality, for my town every week, and it lists the ozone, it lists the the particle matter is 2.5 and 10. 2.5 is a little one that
Mhm.
gets into your blood and messes you up inside, and you can put an air purifier in your home to get rid of that. But lately they've been listing the nitrogen oxide and saying, considering it's a pollutant, like it's too high. They'll say it's 49, 50 poor for sensitive people and it affects breathing. So you look at some of the sites and they don't track the nitrogen. You think, oh, it rained and the 2.5 is low and everything's fine. But then
I'm guessing they talk about this not in relationship to humans, but to the relationships to the water. Nitrogen is very dangerous increase in the water. It immediately kills off a whole bunch of organisms that are living, whether it's an ocean or rivers or whatnot.
Isn't
Because
that what causes like a bloom?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So the change in nitrogen in air will have a profound effect on any water body, basically. But on humans, I don't think that that's an issue, because even if we have a few decimals of the percentage change in the oxygen amount and increase in nitrogen, it's not going to really impact us in any shape or form, to my understanding. At least I've never heard of this. All I know that it's really more of a marine life, which is dramatically affected. And it's not just the fact that it increases in algae, it's throughout, because basically fish is much more sensitive to amount of oxygen in the water. So if you're shifting that balance towards nitrogen, you're going to potentially risk wiping out the whole populations of different water animals. In humans,
Dr.
I
Kogan,
don't.
when it lists it under like AccuWeather, it says NO2, fair, and then it says breathing in high levels of nitrogen dioxide increases the risk of respiratory problems. Coughing and difficulty breathing are more common, and it looks like they consider it an issue for the breathing.
I've never heard of that.
Really? Because a lot of the sites don't track that one, so you don't, they'll say everything is fine, but look at
I've never heard
AccuWeather.
of that.
Look at AccuWeather sometime. Do current air quality in your town, and then look at the AccuWeather site.
Okay,
And
so I'm gonna have to put a halt on this wonderful discussion because we're eating into Dr. Scharf's time.
You guys, let's move with Aliza, and then I will actually Google this and I'll see if I can type something up while we're listening.
All right, everybody. So I'm going to introduce my topic today, and then I've got a little PowerPoint with some notes, so I'll share that with you, but I don't want to dive right into that because the talk is really about attachment theory, and with the purpose of delving a little bit more deeply into ourselves, and of course, really thinking about how this affects our relationships and capacity for deeper relating. So while the notes from the PowerPoint, they're helpful to I'm also a visual person to sort of see that. I kind of prefer the relational, like face-to-face part. So I'm really intentionally starting that way. So the format today, it's going to be a little bit flipped, and I'm going to start off a little intro stuff, and I'm actually going to start with some mind-body practice, because that's going to give us more of a platform to not only intellectually take this stuff in, but to integrate it a little more, and really pay attention to ourselves, keeping in mind that the fundamental of intimacy and relationship really starts with internal focus and our intimacy with ourselves, sort of our conversations within ourselves, and then those extend outwards and influence the quality of our relationships. Okay, so if folks want to go ahead and just get comfortable in their seats. Okay, I'll pull up my notes here. Go ahead and get comfortable in your seats. Okay, wait, I have to share my screen. You can't see anything, correct? Right. Share screen. Here we go. folks can see? Yeah, okay, good. So this is called Self-Remembering Attachment Theory and Practical Applications. Okay, again, generally just coming back to that idea of starting with ourselves. Okay, we'll talk about specifics of paradigms to get into that. I think those of you that have been here before, I really like to bring myself into the room in a transparent way, as transparent as possible, because that creates more openness and safety for our talk, kind of, who is this person? And again, my focus is really primarily on relationship and bonding. So I do a good deal of individual work, but it's always really centered on how folks are really relating and what their bonds look like. And I do a good amount of family work, so couples work, parent-child interactions as well. I've got background in different settings, including school settings, outpatient, in-home, and private practice settings. I'm currently in private practice. Again, I know this is the right group for this. I'm very centered in an embodied approach to therapy and healing. I think if we approach therapy as a intellectual practice only, that it is very limiting, and we see fewer results. When we can really get into our bodies, that's really where we see so much movement and so much healing. And I know this is not a trauma-focused talk, but I will mention with dealing with trauma, embodied approach is, of course, absolutely essential, okay? Embodied and integrative. And I've mentioned this non-dual focus to therapy and healing. And the piece I want to highlight today in that definition is that we're really all growing and healing simultaneously and in relationship. That's really how we heal and grow. Okay, so that's a bit of a shift, for example, from a like either you or me mentality to a both you and me. It's relational. Another way I like to think about the non-dual focus of therapy is an integration of our fragmented parts. Okay, so I think that's probably a talk for another day, but that idea of integrating our fragmented parts, we have to locate them first. We have to often name the shattering in its specific, what the wound really is. And then we can slowly but surely start to bring in those pieces in relationship, right? One example of that would be something like a protective part of us in relationship with a more vulnerable part of ourselves. So a little overview of objectives and intentions in this talk. So I'm going to introduce attachment strategies, and we think of them kind of like defense mechanisms. What are these strategies that we develop as defenses, like protectors? Attachment strategies include secure, anxious, ambivalent, those are synonymous, and avoidant and disorganized. So there's three main attachment styles that we really talk about, okay? I just sort of went into this next piece. We're gonna talk about strategies, stances, and styles. I think most of us have heard terminology around attachment styles. Really important to think about how those come about sort of developmentally. Okay, how do attachment strategies show up in relationships? What does it look like when our strategies are showing up when we're talking to someone, our partner, a parent?
Because I know how much you'd rather have a burger and fries at Charlie's, but since you've already had competition, I just thought
I think somebody's sound might be on. Okay. And we're going to go through the resourcing and orienting techniques, which I've done here before, which are really helpful when we're doing attachment work. Okay. And then we're going to go into the 3 modes of regulating ourselves: auto-regulation, co-regulation, and self-regulation. Okay, we'll have hopefully time for Q&A at the end. Okay. So I'm going to invite folks to start to transition into the mind-body practice. So if folks can kind of get comfortable in their seats, I just uncrossed my legs, I'm planting my feet on the floor, really get grounded. I invite folks to try and find a comfortable position. Okay, and the purpose of this resourcing, this is an internal focus, is to really notice what is already okay within us. That's our platform for exploration. That is this location we can always come back to. Okay. So once you're kind of comfortable in your seat, feet planted on the floor, or elevated perhaps, whatever feels comfortable and right for you. You're invited to close your eyes if that's helpful. We're really going to go inwards. Really start from top of our head. We're going to work our way down. Take note what already feels comfortable, okay, or even good within us. Perhaps your eyes are rested in that position. Perhaps you even notice a temperature feeling comfortable, if that's true for you. Working your way down. Maybe noticing mouth, jaw, tongue. Really take note on what feels okay or good. At any point you need to move or shift to find that location, please go ahead and do so. So much resource internally. Continuing to breathe in a way that feels comfortable for you. Noticing that. Working your way down shoulders. I often end up dropping mine a little bit when I'm paying attention to what feels good. Really noticing that. Working your way down your arms. Perhaps your arms are resting in your lap or arm rests. Notice what feels right for you, comfortable, and okay. Perhaps your arms even feel supported if they're resting on your lap or armrests. Go ahead and notice that. While you're surveying, if you notice anything that feels less okay, you want to acknowledge that. I see you. And then go ahead and bring your focus back to those parts that do feel okay or even good within. Great. And working your way down. So your chest, down to your belly. Your back and your seat. Really notice if you are sitting in a chair that's got back support, or perhaps a cushion under you. Notice what feels good or okay. You need to move some pillows around to find that right adjustment. Go ahead and do that. Working your way down your legs. You can even experiment. You can just rub your legs gently. Maybe that feels good. Maybe that feels like resource for you. If it does, go ahead and notice that. Working your way down those legs, all the way down to your feet. If your feet are supported on the ground under, notice that. How does that feel? If that feels like a resource. You find yourself needing to or wanting to flex your feet a bit, move them around to get to a more comfortable place. Go ahead and do so. Noting that's a resource that you can always come back to whenever you need to. And once you're really located in that resource, that internal body resource, those parts that already are okay within us, you're invited to gently, slowly open your eyes if they're closed. And if your eyes are open, we're going to shift focus to the space around us. This is where we get into that orienting stuff, that location. And this is really an invitation to take in the present moment. Look around at our surroundings and start to be really mindful of what helps us feel secure or regulated, calm. Go ahead and look around. It could be anything from paint, colors, curtains, artwork, little knickknacks, aromatics. If you have something that smells pleasant to you, that's an orienting technique. Really notice that. Anybody who's next to a window and has a nice clear view, that can be very orienting. Yeah, really notice what it's like to look at that tree or that flower. All these supports that are internal and in our environment that are available to us. And really all we need to do is bring a mindful focus to that. All of this that is already okay within us and supports us around us, right? Folks who like to be out in nature or have noticed how being out in nature can be incredibly orienting. Okay, that's support available to us. Okay, and I will invite folks following their resourcing and orienting. Maybe you've made a few mental notes to come back to later. And if at any point during this discussion, when we talk about attachment stuff, this can bring up, you know, things for people. We all have attachment history. You can always come back to resourcing and orienting, okay? Really paying attention to embodied responses as we talk about this material with curiosity and compassion. Let's all have a nice stretch, okay? We're gonna kind of come out of this practice a little bit and get a little bit into the theory stuff, okay? You might want to move your neck around a little bit. You need to shift your position, go ahead. Okay, let's move on. We're gonna start with regulation. What does it mean to be dysregulated when we, anywhere from feeling off to losing it, right? Or when we think about younger kids kind of tantruming, that's dysregulation. So how do we come back to equilibrium? There's really 3 modes that we pull from. And we need all 3 as we develop, and we need to be able to pull from all 3 as adults as needed. Co-regulation, auto-regulation, and self-regulation. Co-regulation is our earliest way where we learn regulation, and that has to do with turning to another for distraction or support. When we think of that early stuff, the skin to skin between parent and child, or heartbeat to heartbeat, that's co-regulation. My toddler was having a moment this morning. She needed to come and kind of sit on my lap and be held, that she needed co-regulation in that moment. And then auto-regulation, I think we are very prone to this in our culture. And again, it's a tool for regulation. We just don't want it to be the only one. Where we do something else, we try to distract ourselves. Okay. So, you know, watching a television program or games, those are fine. When it gets excessive and becomes avoidance only, it's not as helpful, but it can be a helpful and necessary tool for regulation. And then self-regulation is, of course, a much more developed mode. And that's when we're integrating and really metabolizing our feelings. This is where embodied approaches are so helpful, because we don't only have feelings in our brains, right, where we label and name them, we have feelings in our bodies. So to come back to an equilibrium, regulation, that's when we let our feelings exist and move through us. When we're paying attention to our feelings in a real way, what we tend to notice is that they do have some kind of movement. They don't stay static. Okay. Very important and helpful to keep in mind that the attachment system is a threat response system. It is necessary for survival. That's how we develop our attachment systems. And it's in response to threat. It's a threat response system. So this isn't only kind of more abstractly about relationship. This is about survival. And I think when we're grounded in that, we can be much more compassionate with ourselves and others when some of their strategies that may be difficult to manage and deal with might be coming up. So how we attach and connect is a part of our inherent design to survive. We adopt adaptive strategies according to our circumstance and temperament. So what's available to us, both internally and in our environment, right? If we have, you know, a parent who's working a couple of jobs and really strained, they might not be able to co-regulate as much. So we might develop some more auto-regulation, okay? We might develop different strategies according to what's available to us. We'll get into the strategies and styles soon, okay? Attachment strategies become stances. So these are things that we try once, say, a couple of times as a strategy. Then it becomes a stance that's a familiar position to us. Think of a stance that we hold. That then becomes styles, which are more of our default modes. Okay. Attachment involves both expressive and receptive skills. Okay, so that's an ability to seek and express as well as receive and take in. So how we share of ourselves and kind of take in others from our environment. Secure attachment strategies. What are those? What do they really look like? Okay. So they tend to appear as there's low avoidance to people we care about. Okay, so think of that, right? It's a secure strategy. We feel more secure, more relaxed with people we care about. So low anxiety with those we're attached to. Generally speaking, there's an ability to compose oneself more quickly after a caregiver leaves, or in adults, this can look like a partner leaving. Okay, so partner leaves, you might have feelings about that, but you can kind of come back to an equilibrium when you've got more of a secure attachment history. This is a really helpful and I think hopeful percentage here, that to develop secure attachment, we need 38% attunement, about a third of the time for secure attachment. And what that means is that about a third of the time that we are responded to in a way that is in alignment with what we're expressing. Okay, so we're crying and we're our caregiver, oh, okay, you must be hungry. Okay, so about a third of the time that caregiver needs to read you correctly, which is not a majority. The rest of the time is about this symmetry where there's this back and forth. And oh, no, you're not hungry. Okay, maybe you're tired. Okay, oh, that's not it. Maybe you just, need some fresh air. So a majority of the time for this is a secure attachment to develop, it's more about a staying with and a back and forth than it is about getting it right all the time. That's why therapy is really helpful, right? Because therapists aren't meant to be, nor do they have capacity to be mind readers necessarily. But there's a tremendous capacity and commitment to really stay with somebody as they're trying to express something. And then we'll move from the secure strategies to the what we call insecure attachment strategies. Now remember, these develop in an adaptive way according to what's kind of available in an environment. And sometimes there's deficit for, for good reason. Folks go through all kinds of stressors. Okay, sometimes there's more difficult, more traumatic incidents, 100%, where insecure strategies are adopted. So avoidance strategies, this comes up so much in couples work. And what does that mean? What does that look like? So what's interesting here is stress level internally can be high, but cut off from awareness. So it's a kind of muting, numbing, shutting down. So somebody might externally look okay or not have an expression of distress, but internally they've like attached, electrodes and stuff. Stress levels are really high. Okay. Avoidant strategies might also look like, I don't feel anything. What do you mean? What do I feel? This happens with the embodied stuff. I don't feel my feelings in my body. That will generally tell me, okay, looks like there's some avoidance strategies here. It can look like I'll do it all on my own. Won't really rely on anyone else. And remember also, we can have a combination of some of these different strategies, and our style has more to do with our more consistent strategy or our default modes. Avoidant attachment strategies can be connected to chronic fears of rejection. So you think about that earlier development. If an infant is reaching out to a caregiver who's unavailable, for any number of reasons, that infant would develop strategies where they go inward. Okay, and that can reappear developmentally as they go along. So for adults, might not want to reach out for help or, to disclose what's going on internally because there could be a fear of rejection. All right, and back to this appearance of like a detached, dissociated, kind of absent presentation. All right, when we're noticing some of those avoidance strategies coming up, sort of coming back to our bodies, right? If I'm working with somebody who's got avoidance strategies coming up, I might say, let's take a pause and just like take some deep breaths. Just sort of relax, come back into our bodies. If I'm noticing somebody kind of shut down, or if that's happening with a couple, if there's a high conflict thing coming up, I might jump in and say, okay, let's take a pause. Let's take some breaths here together. Sometimes touch can be helpful, sometimes not. I've got some notes on working with young children. We want to help kids come back into their bodies. For folks looking for parenting strategies, we can invite our kids to kind of jump up and down a little bit. Okay, I've done these workshops for preschool educators, and these tools can be really helpful for those little ones who might already have some avoidance strategies. Our attachment styles do develop between like 18 and 36 months, that early. Okay, really coming back to our bodies, noticing what feels good in our bodies. And anxious, ambivalent strategies. I'm mindful of the time. I'll try to move through this last part quickly so we can maybe ask some questions. So anxious, ambivalent strategies, it's, like a preoccupation with caregiver. So really afraid to let your caregiver out of your sight. In adults, that can be really a fear of your partner leaving, being away, get very anxious. And some of that, of course, we all know is very normal for developing kids to go through some anxiety when their caregiver leaves, normative. When it's what we'd think about as like more excessive, or that kid really can't come back to some point of composure, especially after they're in a routine for a while, looks like there's some anxious or ambivalent attachment stuff present and presenting. It can feel very clingy or needy. That comes up a lot in relationship, where the partner, and it's not uncommon to have somebody with avoidance strategies partnered with somebody with anxious or ambivalent strategies. And one feels the other one disappearing, and then the other one feels suffocated. So the avoidant might feel more suffocated. The anxious or ambivalent person might feel kind of abandoned at times. Okay, and there's that same fear that's driven by this fear of rejection or abandonment. And there's this high anxiety that's associated with not having needs met. It's like there's fear that there just won't be enough because maybe needs weren't met at some point. Again, for any number of circumstances or reasons. So folks with more anxious or ambivalent strategies need more reassurance. So if somebody's more anxious or ambivalent and they're away from their partner, they need more check-ins, more text messages, more phone calls. Okay, sometimes more physical touch, but need more reassurance. And both resourcing and orienting are very helpful to come back to. Let's find those internal resources and help you kind of get plugged into your environment, right? Think about them feeling a little bit more held. And then the disorganized strategy, and that came later in attachment theory development, disorganized strategy. And that's what we really see when there's a collapse of the attachment system. That can present with histories of abuse, where there's a real collapse of the attachment system, where there's both a dependence and a fear of caregiver, somebody who's who you need to rely on to meet your needs. The way that can present, sometimes it looks a little wobbly in younger kids, like there's an approach and avoidance at the same time. Okay, and another way of thinking of it's like the gas pedal and the brake pedal are on at the same time. So there's this shutdown, like the system goes short-circuited, and it can lead to that freezing. And if we're noticing that, okay, notice that within ourselves or anybody we're in relationship with. Okay, really understand when somebody's in that shutdown mode, they cannot take in how you feel. It's very helpful. The focus needs to be entirely on them and helping them come back to some regulation. And I'll swing into that. I'm going a little fast. So coming back to regulation, remembering to use any one of those tools, okay? When we're noticing dysregulation in ourselves, we're kind of losing our equilibrium or somebody else, okay? When we're noticing in ourselves, when do I need to call a friend to talk to somebody about what I'm experiencing? When do I need to just take a break, take a walk, listen to some music? And when do I need to sit down with myself and kind of reflect, like, what am I feeling? I need to sit with this for a moment. Let me feel this. Let me notice this. Okay. I'm gonna swing into just some question time. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to throw them out there. I always throw out some questions for reflection if folks want to kind of think about this, take this with them, what felt helpful or unhelpful here, just kind of noticing that. Was there anything that might have been a little triggering? We'd want to notice that. What am I curious about? What do I might want to learn more about? Okay, is there anything I'd like to come back to, like to review or clarify? Okay, and I think folks can I like the unmuting because then I can just kind of hear your question, but if you want to post something to the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay. Is it too hot for questions still?
Aliza,
Sorry, I'm having trouble connecting to the internet. It looks like an issue with the router and echo device, so try restarting them. Unplug both of them, then plug the router back in. Wait 30 seconds.
Okay. Is that, are we still connected? I just want to check in because it sounded like there was some interference.
we are. That was some weirdness on my end.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So I have a direct message asking if you could share the slide presentation with us. So could you send it to me,
Sure.
please?
So yeah, so should I send that to you, Janet, and then you share it with everybody? I don't know.
Yes, I can do
Okay.
that.
Okay. All right, I will do that. I will follow up and send that so it can be sent out. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, you don't have to answer this. I wonder if folks started to think about some of their own strategies. Or family members they notice, partners. There's a new workbook out by a therapist named Eli Harwood called Securely Attached. And I can hear, I'm going to put the PowerPoint back down. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. Okay. Eli Harwood, I'll just put that really quick in the chat if anybody's interested. A nice workbook, anybody who's interested in exploring this a little further. Okay, here's a question. As couples age and face health issues, what's apt to become exacerbated in attachments? Okay, that's a lot because I think there's a component if there's a cognitive issue happening or not, but generally speaking, what I've noticed is, so there's the aging process and some vulnerability that can come along with that. There's also life phase stuff. Retirement, now I know a lot of folks are retiring later and later, and stuff that was kept at bay can come out as a little bit less tolerable. So, you know, very sweeping generalizations, but somebody who might have been home and more of an avoidantly attached person, and their partner retires and maybe their partner is a little more anxious, that person's territory and space is going to feel a lot more invaded. Okay, and that anxious person might suddenly need a lot more from their partner. And if there's cognitive issues and vulnerability, I think there's more complexity kind of beyond the attachment conversation, and requires a new, like a reframe of what are reasonable expectations. Okay, but increased vulnerability can definitely kick up some of that. If there's already a predisposition to some anxious strategies, that can amplify a bit. or a lot. Okay. So anyone else have any questions? I think we're at time, but if anybody wanted to bring another question in, you're welcome to.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Scharf, so much. Everybody, we'll see you next Friday. Janet put in the text in the chat that we will have Catherine Miller next week. And I'll be with you as well, covering COVID, and we'll see what else we're going to cover. So enjoy the warm weather. I don't know how long it's going to last. We'll see each other next week.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
You too.